104.
Order M104, third reading of Bill 104, an act to proclaim Tamil Genocide Education Week. Mr. Thanigasalam.
I recognize the member for Scarborough.
Mr. Speaker, I move third reading of Bill 104, an act to proclaim Tamil Genocide Education Week.
Mr. Thanigasalam has moved third reading of Bill 104, and I recognize him to lead off the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honored to raise today in this legislature to speak on the third reading of my private member's bill, Tamil Genocide Education Week. தமிழுள்ள மண்ணுக்கும் தமிழ் மக்களுக்கும் என் அன்பான வணக்கங்கள். I will begin with a trigger warning. I'll be sharing stories about the horrors of the Mullivaikal massacre and will mention aspects of and related to genocide and trauma. This year marks the 12th year anniversary of the Mullivaikal massacres. Yet, I can hear the cries and screams of the Tamil people as it were just yesterday. War, violence, and structural genocide have been ongoing for decades in Sri Lanka. However, in May of 2009, widely commemorated as May Massacre, the Sri Lankan government engaged in a heightened program of genocide marked by artillery shelling, abductions, rape, murders, denial of food and medicine to Tamils in Mullivaikal. Those days were some of the toughest days. It was a living nightmare for the Tamil people. The radio once played joyous Tamil songs, now only spoke the tragedies of our brothers and sisters being killed, raped, and injured. With tears in our eyes, Tamils around the globe took to the streets, pleading for intervention with the world governments. Yet, despite our best attempts, just like that, in a span of few weeks, we lost over 146,000 of our people. The horrors of this time have sadly become part of us. We carry it with us wherever we go, like a 100-pound brick, unable to shed its weight. I hear of people who cannot bear to turn on the radio once again for fear of hearing the devastating news. I hear of people who do not visit the websites where they saw pictures of the devastation. I hear of people who stop watching Tamil news on TV after seeing the graphic images of injured, mutilated, and dead bodies. I hear of people who say they can taste the pain of the people when they drink kanji, one of the foods that sustained Tamil people in Mullivaikal in 2009. I hear people who say they can smell the stench of rotten bodies after seeing the images of mass graves. One of my constituents once shared, after hearing a story of a young Tamil kid attempting to feed on their mother's dead breast. This story, a young Tamil child attempted to feed on their dead mother's breast. After hearing this story, my constituent could not feed her own child without tears streaming down her cheeks. Others have shared even stories about even a steam hot cup, a vada, or a newspaper all remind them of a time that the community took to the streets in 2009 and triggered painful memories. I too, like my constituents, have unsuccessfully been able to wash away these memories. These are memories that follow around us like a ghost. And so I understand their pain, their grief. I sadly have tasted it myself. There are more stories than I can ever tell. I hear from business owners, public servants, healthcare workers, frontline care workers, essential workers, that they still hold a tremendous amount of pain and grief from the Tamil genocide. Many Tamil youth played a key role in advocating for interventions and continue to share stories how the traumas of the past continue to affect them today. Even today, as these youth share their stories on social media, there has been international interference in trying to silence their voices. However, their stories matter, and we must hear them. These are the words of Madhura Ratnam, a Toronto Trauma Settlement Counselor. She says, I quote, I'm a Canadian-born Tamil woman who has never experienced war and genocide firsthand. How can I possibly understand what my people went through? It's generational trauma, to be exact. I grew up hearing stories about my parents and my family members escaping the war. Most of them were tortured and killed during the last days of 2009 genocide. It hurts to this day that I will never get a chance to see them. I never imagined myself pursuing a social work degree and working with victims of torture and war. However, I realized that the stories and experiences my family members and my Tamil people have shared with me really impacted my life decisions. Intergenerational and historic traumas runs deep and continues for many years. Studies into the mental effects of the Rwandan genocide have found that even after many years later, survivors, their families, they suffer from trauma, PTSD, and depressive and anxiety symptoms. Genocide affects an entire community of people and continues to hurt. We must help ease the pain. Recognition is a key part of healing. The Sri Lankan state has not only denied the responsibility for the genocide, they have been actively working to erase the memory of the genocide. Even the memory of genocide and remembering being targeted. Recently, a memorial monument commemorating the Mullaivaikkal massacre in Jaffna University was demolished. This has been widely condemned by Tamil diaspora and many leaders across the world. These incidents continue to spark fear and reignite the trauma the Tamil community has been experienced due to the genocide. The suffering is ongoing and continues to this day. The diaspora Tamils have strongly urged their respective governments to help acknowledge the pain and suffering they have endured and have been endured by their kin. Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor and Nobel laureate, famously said, "For the dead and the living, we must bear witness." A Tamil genocide education week provides an opportunity to reflect on and educate the public about the enduring lessons of the Tamil genocide and other crimes against humanity. We need to ensure safe spaces for people to discuss topics like this and recognize that healing needs to take place. There's a greater power in collective healing. I have been receiving tremendous support for moving forward with this bill. There are so many Tamil youth in Ontario that came forward to share stories about their pain and suffering through the I Am Tamil campaign. Thousands of people from Sudbury, Windsor, Waterloo, Hamilton, across GTA and all the way to Ottawa have been writing letters to their MPPs asking to pass this bill. I want to thank each and every one of these individuals for their tireless efforts in supporting this bill. Most notably, I want to thank the grassroots organizations such as the National Council of Canadian Tamils, Canadian Tamil Youth Alliance, and the Tamil Youth Organization for all your continuous efforts. We couldn't have come this far without the support of these organizations and the community at large. Last, but not least, I want to thank my colleagues for taking the time to listen to your constituents regarding their trauma and continuing to support this bill. Today, this assembly is making a history. We stand together to denounce genocide and educate our future generation about the impacts of genocide. While we cannot bring back the lives that were lost, together, today, we can make a difference in the lives of many Tamil Canadians by acknowledging their pain and the loss of their family and friends. We are giving the space for Tamil community to heal right here in Ontario. We stand together as a true example of democracy. We stand together for the people of this province. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Further debate?
The structural violence only to be met with the government orchestrated anti-Tamil program in the capital of Colombo, in the southern part of Sri Lanka. In Canada, every citizen of our great nation, reality, United Nations failed us, continue to play an integral role to contribute to our social, economic, and cultural, political values we carry each and every day. I'm proud to be a Canadian. Every nation needs to value the human life and the human rights. In Sri Lanka, Tamil were burned alive, harassed. Tamil businesses were vandalized during the anti-Tamil program in 1958, 1977, and 1983. Different ruling parties and leaders were responsible for these mass atrocities over time, pointing to the responsibility of the Sri Lankan state. And one of the most emotional memories for our community was the act of cultural genocide, the destruction in 1981 of the Jaffna Library, which was known for being the pinnacle of Tamil literature, culture and the heritage. Seeing it burn to ashes was seen by the Ilan Tamils as an act of genocide. Over 95,000 literally irreplaceable books and manuscript newspapers were destroyed through the command of government. This history all because of being born and perceived as a different. Madam Speaker, in May 2009, the armed conflict ended, yet there is still uninvestigated allegation of genocide, crime against humanity, and war crimes. Hundreds to thousands of Tamil, most of them are women and children, and girls were raped and sexually mutilated before the execution. Tamil men and women who were detained after crossing into the government control areas are still
brutal violence during the month of May of 2009. Tamil Canadians continue to carry the pain and suffering from the loss of loved ones and the physical and mental trauma they themselves have experienced. The United Nations defines genocide as any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious groups as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily and mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children to the group to another group. Speaker, according to the United Nations, in May 2009 alone, about 40,000 to 75,000 Tamil civilians were brutally killed. Other estimates have placed the death toll at 146,679 civilians. These figures only reflect the death toll in 2009 leading up to May 18th, the day on which the civil war ended. The loss of Tamil civilians' lives during the genocide, which continued for decades in Sri Lanka, is much higher. In addition, the Sri Lankan state has systematically excluded the Tamil population of their right to vote and to maintain their language, religion, and culture, ignoring the significant population whose primary language was Tamil, thereby putting them at a serious disadvantage of participating in public service of Sri Lanka. This is why this Awareness Week bill must be a tool to not just acknowledge the horror, but honor the lives of those who were lost, as well as a step towards reconciliation, recognizing the outcry of the Tamil community to maintain awareness of this genocide and other genocides that have occurred around the world in order to prevent such crimes against humanity from happening again. As a Bangladeshi Canadian, I understand the importance of this recognition and the work towards healing and justice. Bangladeshis have lived through their own struggle during 1952 language movement and the brutal 9 months killing in 1971 in an attempt to erase a group's identity, their language, and their culture. As we speak of education of this genocide, it is also important to recognize the continued struggle of the people years after. My colleague, the MPP for Beaches this year, conducted numerous interviews with Tamil Canadians about their experience during this dark period of time in their lives. Today, I'd like to share some of these stories who have given permission to share. She shared a story of a young family. His family had been in Colombo during the riots, and his wife had been 9 months pregnant. She had to escape over a stone wall from the mobs, and they were hidden in the basement of Sinhalese friends. It was terrifying. His wife and unborn baby were almost killed, and there were times when people came knocking at the door and checked the house, looking for them. And had they been found, it wouldn't have just been them who were killed, but the family that was hiding them that would have also been killed. Another story, and I quote, a lot of houses of people we knew were bombed. My cousins were tortured and captured by the Sri Lankan government, and one of my cousins still missing. These were my first cousins. My father's siblings live in Colombo, and a couple of years ago we visited with them at a wedding in London. Somehow the photos of that event got out, maybe from Facebook, and my cousin's family was taken in and interrogated. They were questioned and threatened. So now we can have no connections with anyone back home anymore. Speaker, these stories of horror, of pain, need to be remembered. However, in recent days, we are continuing to see attempts of erasing history with the dehumanization of genocide commemorations. Last year's destruction of the Mullawaikal Memorial at Jaffna University, a monument to pay tribute to the tens of thousands of Tamils massacred, is an example of the continued attempt to not only erase the shameful legacy of the state-led massacre, but also to continue marginalization of the Tamil people in Sri Lanka. With so many deaths and enormous loss, these destructions are some of the shameful ways to deny the Tamil people the space for mourning and healing. I would like to thank the Tamil Canadian community across Ontario who have organized and worked tirelessly to advocate for this bill, for all of the work they do in their communities and outside of it. I want to take a moment to recognize the hundreds of thousands of people who participated in email campaigns, social media campaigns, and took every opportunity to raise awareness of this important issue. Your work and your passion makes this world a better place, and it is an honor to stand here and speak to this bill and support the Tamil Canadian community across Scarborough and Ontario. Speaker, every single one of these stories carry the immense weight of the injustices and that the Tamil diaspora has experienced at the hands of Sri Lankan government and continue to experience to this day. The path to healing and reconciliation requires us to tell these stories and recognize the trauma and work towards justice. I thank you for this time, and I thank the member from Scarborough Rouge Park for bringing this bill forward. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Further debate? I recognize the member from Scarborough Agincourt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My colleagues described the entire Tamil genocide in very graphic details. I'm going to focus on why it is important that this House recognizes the genocide and what is the relevancy of Bill 104 for this House, for the people of Ontario, and for the people of Canada. Madam Speaker, it is my honor to stand up in this August House to speak on an important issue dear to my heart. First of all, I would like to congratulate my colleague Vijay Thanigasalam on this important milestone in his family and in the lives of those in the Tamil community. I am so proud that this House is acknowledging the trauma and the persecution the Tamil community in Sri Lanka faced in 2009 and onwards. It is essential to call a spade a spade. What happened to the Tamil people was a genocide. It is also essential to stand up for truth and bring justice to the victims, their families, and their survivors. Madam Speaker, we stand up here today to acknowledge the past, not to cast the blame. It is important to address the Tamil genocide issue for two reasons. First, to bring closure and healing to the wounds of the past. Without healing and closure to the victims, individually and collectively, there can be no reconciliation. Furthermore, the systematic denial policy is the final stage of genocide, as renowned genocide scholar Gregory Stanton stated. In addition to the victim, the denial policy traumatized the victim and victimized the future generations of the victim nation. As the grandson of a survivor and third generation of the Armenian genocide survivor, I lived the trauma every time the perpetrator questions or denies my grandfather's inhumane treatment, his survival story, and the loss of entire generations of our family. Therefore, it is critical for us to send a message to the denialists that we will not bow down to their revisionist history and disgraceful spin. The second reason, Madam Speaker, why we need to address this thorny issue head on is because we owe it to humanity to learn from the mistakes of the past so that we will not repeat these atrocities again. The 20th century is called Century of Tears because over 60 million people were killed due to a heinous act of genocide. Regrettably, No society is immune from the scourge of genocide and crimes against humanity. You just need one firebrand individual to mobilize a society and turn one against each other. Us versus them. We have seen how Talat Pasha masterminded the genocide of Armenians, Greeks, Pontians, Assyrians, and Chaldeans in the Ottoman Empire. We have seen how Stalin caused the Ukrainian Holodomor. We have seen how Hitler initiated the Holocaust. We have seen how Pol Pot instigated the Cambodian genocide. We have seen how Paul Kagame triggered the Rwandan genocide, and so on, Madam Speaker. I can go on for the rest of the day. And therefore, it is imperative to sensitize the future generations and educate them of the importance of peaceful coexistence and respect for our diverse makeup, and to protect the vulnerable in our society. By doing so, we will be able to make the 21st century a better century and more human century than the 20th century. Never again should mean never again, and our compass to leave a better world for future generation. This should be our generation's legacy. Madam Speaker, I stand up here in solidarity with the Tamil people and the importance of adopting this bill. Thank you very much.
Further debate? I recognize the member from Humber River, Black Creek.
Thank you, Speaker, and Vanakkam. I rise today in support of this important bill to recognize Tamil Genocide Education Week here in Ontario, and I would like to thank the member from Scarborough Rouge Park for bringing it forward. Speaker, I will never forget the 10th annual commemoration event of the Mullah Kaval massacre held in Scarborough some years back. And Speaker, I will also never forget the member from Scarborough Rouge Park's passionate and intensely personal speech that day. Though it was delivered in Tamil, and I could not understand the words, the passion he showed us could tell a story in itself. And I've told him this many times over the years, and I'll never forget seeing that powerful side of him. I was proud to stand alongside my NDP colleagues then, and also all members of this House in supporting this bill during second reading. And I'm proud to support this important legislation today at its third reading. It is my hope that this bill passes unanimously and is written into law as soon as possible. We must pass this legislation as soon as possible to show the Tamil community that Ontario stands with them. My community of Humber River Black Creek is home to a strong and vibrant Tamil community. May 8th will mark 12 years since the Mullah Vaikal massacre, when thousands of Tamils were murdered by the Sri Lankan government at the end of decades-long war in Sri Lanka. Every year since then, we recognize May 18th as Tamil Genocide Remembrance Day to remember and honor all those who were lost during the Tamil Genocide. This important legislation acknowledges and recognizes and educates all Ontarians about the atrocities the Tamil people have had to endure, including a state-sponsored campaign of genocide carried out by the Sri Lankan government. From the Black July in 1983, where thousands of Tamils were murdered, to the Mullah Vaikal massacre in 2009, the Tamil people were forced to endure a state-sponsored campaign of genocide. During this period, tens of thousands of Tamil men, women, and children were abducted by the Sri Lankan government and were never heard from again. In many cases, when worried families went in search of their loved ones, they too were also murdered. Many were dumped into mass graves containing hundreds of bodies that had been found throughout Sri Lanka. It was reported that one village alone had 300 to 400 bodies buried in mass graves. Many had been forced to endure horrific campaigns of sexual violence. Speaker, I have spoken to many members of the Tamil community who have told me stories of the horrors that they or their loved ones have had to endure. We must all stand together to denounce such unspeakable atrocities, and we must do everything we can to educate others to ensure that they never happen again. The trauma caused by the Tamil genocide is intergenerational. Tamil youth growing up today continue to face the pain endured by their parents and grandparents. We must name and recognize the Tamil genocide, and we must continue to remember all those who have been lost. We must provide a platform for the Tamil people to tell the stories and share the memories of all of those lives that were lost, and to educate others so that this genocide shall never be forgotten and shall never be repeated. It is important that Tamil Genocide Education Week be recognized by all Ontarians and all Canadians. Even those of us who are not Tamil need to recognize and offer solidarity so that we can better understand the injustices the Tamil people have gone through and continue to experience. This bill is an important step so that the Tamil community can move towards reconciliation and healing. I stand with the Tamil community in their quest for justice and in recognition of the Tamil genocide, and I'm proud to support this legislation. Thank you.
Further debate? Further debate? I recognize the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks very much, Madam Speaker. I'm honored to be here with my colleagues in the chamber to debate the third reading of this bill and hopefully see it passed. I want to start by thanking the member for Scarborough Rouge Park for introducing this bill, I think a couple of years ago now, maybe 2 years or so ago. And I'm not going to take a lot of time to repeat what has been said. I did come into the legislature while the member for Scarborough Asian Court was speaking so powerfully, and of course my own colleague from Humber Creek, from Humber River Black Creek. Do I do it every time, Tom? I do it every time. Humber River Black Creek. Their words are very powerful, and the death and the violence and the trauma, not only throughout the years, but that's carried with every person, every survivor, every relative, not only currently, but that will sit with them for generations to come, is unspeakable. And I think we all realize that. But I am proud to be here at this moment in time to speak in favor, of course, of the bill, Tamil Genocide Education Week, Bill 104. We know that the Tamil community has been advocating for recognition of the Tamil genocide at all levels of government for some time now, for a very long time. And I also know that New Democrats have been standing shoulder to shoulder with the Tamil community in that effort for the entire time. I can remember myself, Speaker, when the Tamil community here in Toronto and the GTA largely took to the streets, a youth-led protest that brought thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Tamil community members to University Avenue and to the Gardiner Expressway, literally shutting down the Gardiner Expressway in their pain and outrage to try to bring the world's attention, not just Toronto's attention, not Ontario, not Canada, but the world's attention to what was happening in Sri Lanka. I was proud to go out a couple of times and sit with people and chat with them and provide support, understanding, but particularly to share in the pain and anguish that the community was feeling, and that the community frankly continues to feel, Speaker. We took the opportunity a couple years back in 2016 to host the very first Malabaikal Memorial here at Queen's Park. We were proud to do that. It was a time to once again recommit our passion and our determination to work with the Tamil community, to support the Tamil community in their drive to have the genocide acknowledged, as well as to establish exactly this kind of action that we are hopefully establishing today. We are here really because of the hard work of the Tamil community members, the work and the commitment of those activists and community members, their passion, their determination, their imperative to make sure that we take every action possible to support them in their struggles and to ensure that their desires to deal with not only the Education Week but the acknowledgement are supported in every way possible. But it is their work and it's their drive that has brought us here today. And so I just want to say I'm really proud to be here. And I know that if it wasn't COVID-19, the galleries would be packed. There would be people in everyone's offices. We would have an amazing celebration of the determination and the victory of the Tamil community in the passing of this legislation, because really this is their moment, and I just regret that that we're not able to have the community here in great numbers as we know they would be in seeing the passing of this legislation happen. We've supported the opposition. The official opposition has supported this legislation from day one since its introduction. We've pushed many times for the government to pass the bill as soon as possible, and we're finally here, and I think we're all very, very happy about that. It's good to see that the government's making good on their promise to the Tamil community after 2 years of work to get us to this particular spot. I want to just end by saying that the community knows that New Democrats will always stand with you. I can remember Jack Layton, our former federal leader who passed away several years ago now, being a very passionate supporter of the Tamil community. And much of what I became aware of in terms of Tamil history, it came from Jack, from some of the people that he introduced me to, as well as some of the the knowledge and experience that he shared with me as a leader that he was. I just want to send one last message, which is that we will never stop standing with you, standing by your side through the continued journey of healing, of growth, and of the next generations and the generations after that. There needs to be justice. Justice comes with acknowledgement and with commitment, and I want you to know that the NDP, the Ontario NDP, is with you every step of the way. Congratulations today for this bill finally being passed.
Further debate? I recognize the member from Davenport.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Speaker Vanakkam. It's a great honor to join the debate today on Motion 104, the Tamil Genocide Education Week Act, and to stand with Tamil Canadians in honoring and remembering the thousands of innocent civilians who were killed during the Tamil Genocide, as well as the ongoing and systemic violence and repression against Tamil people by the Sri Lankan government. I'm also pleased to support this bill and speak on behalf of the Tamil community in Davenport and to thank the member from Scarborough Rouge River for bringing this forward, and all of the Tamil community and community organizations that have helped bring this forward. We are proud in Davenport to be the home of a strong Tamil community, but also to the Tamil Co-op, a community hub at Lansdowne and Bloor since the 1980s, established to provide housing for Tamil refugees who came to Canada after the violence targeting Tamil people during Black July. The Co-op is a tremendous example of what can be done when governments work together on housing. But beyond being a place to call home, the Co-op has created an anchor for Tamil Canadians in the West End and has allowed the Tamil culture to thrive, community to grow, and trauma to heal. Today, that Co-op is thriving home to people from many cultural communities, including Burmese, Vietnamese, Filipino, and Ethiopian heritage. Its board recently elected a majority of young members who were raised in the Co-op as children, adding to the diversity of the voices that are represented there. And I wanted to mention that the Tamil Co-op is also home to the first Tamil languages library in Canada, Madam Speaker. And I think that points to the significance of education and of language in the preservation of culture, especially when people are uprooted or seek refuge in a new country. And it is in stark contrast, I would add, to the burning of the public library in Jaffna, the destruction of Tamil people's history, their aspirations, and ultimately the attempt to annihilate them. My first meeting, actually, of Tamil refugees goes back to growing up in Newfoundland when 155 Tamil refugees were left adrift near St. Shots by a local, they had been dumped off of a cargo ship. And it's a reminder of the trauma that continues when people leave their home and the really dangerous and often violent journeys they have to embark on. And when they were found off the coast of St. Shots, it was by a skipper named Gus Dalton, who just passed away a few years ago. And they were dumped about 300 kilometers in the brutal icy cold of the Atlantic Ocean. They were found 3 days after they'd been set adrift, dehydrated, starving. And many of those people, they survived, and they went on to live in Ontario and Quebec. But their trauma, of course, endured far beyond that experience. We in the official opposition, NDP, stand with Tamil Canadians, as our leader has already said, in remembering the thousands of those killed during the Tamil genocide. And this has been a long-standing position of the NDP, and it will continue, as this community will continue, to fight for justice for victims. However, for justice and reconciliation to take place, there needs to be formal recognition and accountability for the Tamil genocide. And this is a step toward that. An acknowledgement of the lives lost and the importance of justice and reconciliation. I want to be clear to my Tamil friends across Ontario and in my riding. We stand with you, we will always stand with you, and thank you for your extraordinary and ongoing contributions to our province. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further debate? Further debate? Further debate? Mr. Thanigasalam has moved third reading of Bill 104, an act to proclaim Tamil Genocide Education Week. Is it the pleasure of the House that the motion carried? I declare the motion carried.
Third reading of the bill. Clause on motion. Close the rules.
Be it resolved that the bill do now pass and be entitled as in the motion. Orders of the day.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.